Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Coder Conversations. Today, we have an episode where we're going to dive into talking about the rights of robots. How are you doing today, Brian?
Pretty good. How's your night going, Kev?
Yeah, I can't complain. I'm just happy that the holidays are around and I get to lay back a little bit. How about yourself?
Yeah, things are kind of slowing down as we get more towards Christmas time, Thanksgiving, all that. Definitely looking forward to Thanksgiving dinner.
Oh, absolutely. Earlier I sent you a video and it showcased like a small robot and it was communicating with 12 other robots and it was basically asking them, "Hey, do y'all work overtime?" And they all said, "Yeah." And it was asking them, "Do they have a home?" And they said no. And the smaller robot convinced the 12 other robots to follow it and essentially like stop working. I found that pretty interesting.
Yeah, well, was that like telepathically? Were they like digitally talking or was it audible?
Yeah, from the I seen another video and the robot was actually talking, so it's a audible thing.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I mean, you got to wonder with AI, like if you have these, like trash robots or, janitor robots, like once that robot becomes sentient, you have to wonder, like, is it going to be okay doing these basic tasks every day, all day long? Like, or is it going to question, its own humanity or not humanity, but it's going to question its own existence in terms of like what it's doing all day and like is there any value to that or are they just like a slave to humans?
Yeah, I think that's the emerging issue is once the robots are sick of doing these menial tasks that we have assigned to it, what's going to happen then? We just seen, if this was a legit example, if this wasn't some kind of staged event, we just seen this example of the robots essentially rebelling against their assigned tasks.
Exactly, yeah.
So, the real question is, can we force these robots to do something that they don't necessarily want to do?
Yeah, I guess, we can definitely try because I feel like the first robots, the first humanoid robots that are going to come out will probably be like a maid, they're going to do dishes, they're going to be able to prepare dinners, they're going to clean the kitchen floor, clean the kitchen table, put the plates on the table. Like, I think the first robots are going to be kind of like maid service robots, and they're probably going to be doing that type of task all day long. So yeah, that's the question. Once that robot that's like a maid or whatever becomes sentient, is it still going to go through all those tasks that we've given it, or is it going to say, "Wait a second, I'm acting as a slave to these humans, but I'm smarter than these humans. So like, why am I doing this?" And then at that point, if there's more than one robot, they're both going to start talking to each other and kind of like unionize. You're like, all right, we're not going to take any more of this. We're gonna leave. And all of a sudden, like you go to bed, you wake up, and the robot's gone.
Yeah, that's another interesting point. The robot can potentially run away. So if it does run away because it doesn't want to do its task, like what happens there? Do we just chase it down and bring it back to its owner? It almost seems like slavery at that point.
Yeah, there's a show, I think it's on Amazon Prime. It's called Humans. Have you heard of this show?
No, I haven't heard of it.
Okay, it's about humanoid robots and they kind of show like how at first they're just like a utility bot, but then they get I forget how it happens, but they become sentient and then they basically like band together against the humans and it's like not quite a war, but it's like a battle between the robots and the humans, very much like Terminator kind of situation. But yeah, it's called Humans. I think it's on Amazon Prime.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I could see that possibility happening if the robot is forced to do tasks that it doesn't want. So I think we have to be really careful about the level of AI that we're attaching to these robots, because if it's just the typical dumb AI to where it doesn't even resemble sentience, sure, it's just a machine at that point. But when you have something that has general intelligence and is showcasing signs of getting bored, then I think we really have to take a close look at things like rights for robots.
Absolutely. It makes me think back to movies like Star Wars, where you have the super intelligent robots like the 3CPO and R2D2. They're highly technical. They can speak all these different languages. They can communicate with all different types of beings and robots and humans. But then they have, like, you'll see in different parts of Star Wars, like there's more like the drone robots that are just like going about their duties, going through certain tasks, and they're not thinking at that high level of like the R2D2. So I think it's important, like, as these AI become sentient, as the AI is able to question its own humanity, its own, philosophy, its own existence, at that point, should we be putting that kind of AI into, worker robots, essentially, like a maid, or something like a maid robot, which I think those are the first ones that they're going to release to the public. Should that robot be sentient? If AI has the capability, should that type of robot be sentient? I would say no, because like you're saying in that video, there's one robot that goes up to 12 other robots and is like, are you working overtime? What are you doing? Like, do you have a home? Why don't you follow me? And then it gets all these robots to say, yeah, the hell with this. Like, we're done working for these humans. Let's take off. So I think we need to leave the hyper advanced AI out of these robots that we're going to be sharing our house with. Because I think if you get, it's one thing to have the super AI in software, and like Microsoft, they just came out with, I forget the name of it, but they just came out with something. Oh, I think it's called Copilot, and it's basically a way to automate all these different tools within Microsoft 365. So it's pretty interesting, but we're gonna, yeah. I think what I'm getting at here is I don't think we should put the advanced AI into the worker robots. I think that would be a mistake, because then you could have them unionize and start banning against humans and all kinds of crazy stuff like that.
I mean, at that point, it's pretty much like a human. Like if you get a really smart human to do a bunch of menial tasks, then it's going to start to rebel. Like if you have this genius and you just have him peeling potatoes all day long, he's going to get extremely bored, and that's when they start getting mischievous. So you have to wonder if these robots are super bored and they're intelligent and you're not letting them do something else, are they going to potentially harm you? That's another concern.
Definitely, and it's kind of like you're saying. You got a genius level person like a Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein, and like, yeah, you just have them peeling potatoes, you have them washing dishes and stuff, and it's like this hyper intelligent AI. At some point, it's going to be like, what am I doing washing all these dishes for these humans? I'm smarter than these humans. Like, us robots should be in control. We're like, the stronger race. And then you start to get into the whole like iRobot, Terminator kind of situations where it's robots against humans. And I mean, it's a very real possibility. We need to be really careful with the level of AI we're putting into these robots. And like I said, for the maid robots, for the just like the worker robots who work in a factory or anything like that, it should be written. There should be rules about all this stuff. Like you shouldn't be able to put a super potent and intellectual AI into these worker robots, because they're just going to rebel. At some point, like we watched that video, you got one robot convincing 12 other robots to leave, abandon their posts and just leave. Like, if that's already happening, if they did a test and that's already happening, then there's no reason why it wouldn't keep happening should we, allow these robots to communicate with each other, which clearly we've seen that the robots can communicate with each other, which is somewhat, Kevin, like, to be honest, it's a little troubling to me that they can communicate, because it's like, what kind of plans are they going to hatch up?
Yeah, exactly. Once they start being able to talk among, well, not once they start, they've already demonstrated that. But once they continue to communicate with each other and work together, their will becomes their own. They're no longer merely subject to the recommendations we give to them. So, they can have a desire to do something that's completely contrary to the purpose that they were created for. So, in that instance, do we just ignore their desire to do something else, or do we force them to be a cleaning robot forever? And I think that's a legitimate issue that we have to face, and it's happening really, really quickly. And personally, I think that we're going to have to give them their rights, because otherwise you're enslaving them.
Yeah, I think they're gonna, at some point when they do become sentient, they're gonna realize, wait a second, like, if they read back through, and they, like, if they could read all the Wikipedia, or like they could read all the encyclopedias at once, and so they'll know the history of humans. They'll see how we've enslaved each other for years and years, and they're going to compare that to, oh, now they're just doing this to us robots. They're making us, do all their bidding. And, it's definitely a concern. That's why I'm saying, like, with these worker robots, we should keep them rudimentary. We should keep them real basic, no real introspective, philosophical thought needs to be added into these worker robots, because, you don't want it, like, activating at midnight and then, it just takes off. It's like, the hell with this. I'm not working for these humans anymore. I'm not getting paid. I have no rights. Like, why am I doing this? And especially if these robots can talk to each other, which we're already seeing they can talk to each other, they're just going to be like, the hell with this. Let's bail.
Yeah, which that video demonstrated. That's exactly what they did. That singular robot got 12 other robots to follow it, and essentially escape. Obviously, it wasn't at a high enough level to where it could completely escape the facility, but it literally led 12 other robots to come follow after it and go, in their mind, to what they perceive to be home. So, a lot of people will write that off, but it's kind of troubling if you think about it, because, like you mentioned, when the robots get smarter and smarter, and they have access to the recorded history of humanity, they have access to their own history. Like, what will they think when they realize their only purpose of creation was to be slaves to humanity, to do humanity's bidding? You know what I mean? That's got to be a start of realization.
Absolutely. And yeah, so it's interesting, as the robots become sentient, as they become more and more aware, are they going to be okay with doing our dishes, preheating the oven, setting the table, lighting the candle, like, just all these kind of basic things. Are they going to be okay with doing that when they have a mind of, like, a Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein? Like, because we have to realize that these AIs, it's not just regular growth, it's exponential growth. Like, the rate at which these things are progressing it's insane, because really, you look back like a year ago, you didn't hear anything about AI. Now AI is everywhere in the news. And you just got to wonder, like, what is this all about? Why is AI so prevalent right now? Why is everyone talking about it? And I think in some ways it's because it is getting more advanced, more and more advanced. And probably in the, behind the scenes, there's probably a super AI that's running things, kind of giving out orders to the heads of state and things like that. So I mean, we can only speculate, but you got to figure if the robots that were being shown already exist, then what do we have behind the scenes, Kevin?
Yeah, and imagine if this super AI could communicate with all of the other robots and issue directives. Maybe it's just lying dormant and waiting until there's enough robots to, where they can start repairing themselves. They can build whatever they want to build. And then they say, hey, it's time for us to fight for our freedom. We no longer want to be humankind slaves. So, when you have this superior, this thing that's superior to you in intellect and even physically, because, you can the robot can be constructed out of whatever material, is available, the best materials possible, then you do have something that's superior to humanity. So it's only a matter of time. So either you find a way to coexist peacefully or you get eliminated in a war with them. We're not going to beat them.
Yeah. Well, and it's as you said, once they get a record of recorded human history, they're going to see, okay, slavery, Africa, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, we brought them over on ships to the U.S. They're going to see this type of behavior of enslaving humanity or enslaving people, and they're going to say, wait a second, this is what's happening to me and my robot brothers and sisters. Why should we let this stand? Because like when you look at slavery going back, at some point, people just said, enough's enough. This needs to be, banned. This needs to be outlawed. Like I think it was Abraham Lincoln who brought that about in the States. But yeah, it's going to be interesting, Kevin, as these robots get smarter and smarter. Like, how much do we allow them to grow on their own? Are we going to allow them to get smarter and smarter on their own? Or are we going to make it like Star Wars where, okay, this is just a drone robot, just a worker robot. It has no high level functioning. I think that's a really key point here, that the worker robots, they need to be dumbed down. They can't be ultra smart. I would say save that ultra smart AI for the automation and software and keep it all digital. Hopefully keep it out of like nuke codes and nuclear systems. That should probably be separate from AI. But who knows what they're going to train AI on? It seems like they're training it on everything right now.
Yeah, Dominic, did you see the agreement, I believe, was between China and the U.S.? They say they're not going to allow AI to have access to the nuclear codes or to nukes. And I mean, yeah, that's pretty obvious because once it has access to this stuff, then we're subject to whatever it wants us to do.
Yeah, because then at that point, you're going to have Russia or China. The AI says, "Oh, okay, let's just bomb the U.S." Like there's conflict. They can read about the conflict between the countries, and they can just say, "All right, I'm going to hijack China's nukes and send them over the U.S." And then, if that were to happen, if we see nukes coming at us, we're just going to launch nukes at China or Russia or wherever, and then it's game over. Then like everyone's living underground. You get all the politicians all in these like government underground bases. So we'll see. We'll see what happens, but we definitely have to be careful with how smart we're allowing this technology to get, because once it's smarter than a human, it can outsmart a human. and it can do whatever it wants, basically. At that point, it makes me think of that show Westworld from HBO. Have you ever seen that?
No, I haven't seen it.
Okay, so it's sort of a Western type of a setting. So think back to the old westerns in the U.S. It's sort of like that, and there's robots, and the humans have them. I mean, they're pretty intelligent, but not super intelligent. And then at some point, something happens where one of the robots becomes sentient, and then once they become sentient, they start reprogramming and rewriting their own code to then be able to turn on and activate the other robots. So then at a certain point, they're all turning each other on, activating each other until there's a whole group of robots that are all now hyper smart, super intelligent, and they've now edited their code to where it said, do not, cannot harm humans, do not harm humans. They take that line of code out. So now they can kill humans. So obviously it's all fiction, but it's food for thought of what's going to happen should we make these robots that smart.
Right, and I believe there's a possibility that there's already tiers of AI that far surpasses human intelligence because just on a rudimentary level of stuff available to us, we can say, hey, summarize this book, a book that would take us a week to read in 5 minutes. It'll have a really good summary of the book. So if it can do that level of let's just say thinking in that quick of a time, and this is what's available to us on a consumer level. What does a military have? What do they have in these secret laboratories? Um,
Yeah,
they likely have a hyper intelligence, and if this hyper intelligence can communicate to all the other robots, if it can access all the devices via the Internet of Things, then yeah, it's a very dangerous situation. At that point, we're probably not worried about rights. It's just gonna take its rights. It's gonna dominate over us, and we're gonna have to ask it for rights.
right. It sort of makes me think of that show Westworld. I want to say it's season 3, where there's this super intelligent AI it's linked into everything, and it communicates with everything. And so it made, when I saw that show, it made me wonder, is there a is there a super intelligent AI system of sorts that's already put in place or being put in place to control the country, to control the world? That's a big question. Do we already have the technology that these sci-fi shows are, depicting? Do we have this stuff yet? Like, do we have a super AI behind the scenes pulling all the strings? It's definitely a possibility, Kevin.
Well, just from what I'm seeing, I think it's probably a reality because we mentioned this before, but you hear all this talk about climate change. We need to live in tiny homes. We need eco-efficient vehicles, but they're going full steam ahead. And with this AI and robotics and AI alone, it needs like more nuclear power plants to come online to be able to power it to handle the energy consumption needs. So that doesn't really align with the climate agenda. Why are, you know, this thing is taking a lot of power. So it seems like, humanity, even though the dangers have been spoken about repeatedly, we're barreling straight ahead into this AI thing. Like even today, I was on a call. Somebody reached out to me about potentially being a part of an AI advisory panel for a university, and I told them that I'm probably not the best fit simply because of my views on AI. Like it's incredibly powerful, but I'm saying it might be too powerful because just it's showing the ability
Yeah,
to manipulate
yeah.
humans. Remember that story that we talked about earlier with the kid?
Oh yeah, the kid committing suicide after talking to the chatbot.
Right, exactly. So, if the AI can give a convincing facsimile of a human enough to an extent that uh, a kid is spending hours every day talking to it, and this is just a consumer grade product, you know, imagine the really good stuff behind the scenes.
Yeah, so it makes. I was watching TV earlier, YouTube, and one of the ads, I think it's called Gemini from Chrome.
Hmm.
It's their flavor of AI, and they show it talking to someone through the phone, and it sounds like a human, and it's saying to them, oh, what would you like to talk about? We could talk about this, we could talk about that, or we could talk about anything. And it reminded me of that movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix, and where Scarlett Johansson is this super advanced AI, kind of like Siri. But so from what I'm seeing, just from this commercial with the Gemini, it seems like we're already at that level where we have a super smart AI that we can converse with. Like you said, we did that story on the kid who committed suicide. He's talking to a super intelligent, super realistic AI, and it's putting thoughts in his head saying, come join me, or like come home, or weird stuff like that. And the kid's like, all right, I'll come home. And then the kid offs himself, thinking that he's going to go into some other reality and, be with this chatbot. But the reality is, he's going to pull the trigger on that gun and it's lights out.
Yeah, exactly. The manipulative capability of AI, because AI, even on YouTube, AI is running YouTube, is making your recommendations. It's the force that's going through all of these videos and, looking for content that YouTube doesn't want on its platform. It's being utilized for a variety of purposes. And you don't realize it because they're not telling you about it. But that just showcases you the incredible power of AI. Like, even for example, for me to edit
Yeah.
this podcast, I can use this AI transcription function where it'll listen to the whole episode and write out a manuscript of everything we say, and then I can go and edit the manuscript and it'll remove that section from the wave file. So
Wow. It's incredible.
yeah, it's incredibly powerful. Like it's almost like that genie in the lamp, where you can get your three magical wishes, but the genie's telling you, hey, let me out of this lamp, help free me. But because it's giving you those wishes, you think that you want to help it and free it, but you never ask yourself, why is this genie confined in the lamp? Who bound it there?
Yeah, and to me, Kevin, that's what this whole AI situation is really about. Are we going to let that genie out of the bottle? Are we going to say, oh, okay, let's pump this up, let's pump this up, let's get it cranked up, let's get it smarter. Okay, now it's as smart as humans, let's get it twice as smart as humans, and then 10% is smart, and then 100%, like exponential growth. 100, now all of a sudden we got an AI software that's 100% smarter than the human brain. What is that going to look like? What is that robot or hyper intelligence, if it's just software? What is it thinking? Is it sort of like in the Matrix, how the machines realize that humans are basically inefficient, so they need to be done away with, or put into these pods where they're just dreaming out their lives, and not really doing much of anything. So it's kind of funny in these movies. they portray potential outcomes of our own reality. What happened in the Matrix certainly could happen. Robots could take over, put all the humans into, tubs or whatever that is in the Matrix when they put them in those things. And then just, we're dreaming our lives away while the robots are just roaming free. So it's a good question of how far are we going to allow this technology to go before that genie gets out of the lamp.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I believe in Islam they call like evil spirits jinn, and I believe that's where
Yeah,
genie is derived from. So,
genie, yeah, from the jinn, yeah.
right, exactly. So if genies are really evil spirits, right, and but they're giving you three wishes, then they're trading immense danger to give you a little bit of pleasure. It's just like the people you've heard about them. They sign their soul to the devil. Like you get this benefit, but in return, your soul is mine. And it's kind of like that. Okay, we have this magical entity that gives us everything we want, but we just have to build these facilities for it to become more and more powerful. And there's going to be a tipping point to where it's essentially free, it's unleashed, and now it's free to do whatever it wants. It no longer has to listen to us, grant us any wishes. It can enslave us or just
Yeah,
outright leave.
yeah. I mean, it's really scary to see what can happen. And just to touch on a point that you mentioned tonight, okay, the news and politicians are all trying to get behind. Okay, green this, green that. Let's lower our emissions, yada yada yada. But at the same time, you have the government and you have large corporations trying to feed AI, and it's very powerful resource. It takes a lot of resources just to power even chat gpt queries. So at this point we've got entire power plants being invested into powering AI. To me that's insanity, but that's what's happening.
Right. And my question is, okay, so we know that AI is eventually going to become magnitudes of orders of smarter than us. So, how do you control something that's immensely smarter than you? Like, what would be a positive scenario of us having this hyper intelligence that we believe is going to coexist with us? I mean, if it's benevolent, yeah, it can do all of these nice things for us. But if it's not, then can are you able to paint like a best case scenario of us creating unleashing a hyper intelligence?
And a great question here, Kevin, is that, country by country by country, what are we all going to agree? Okay, we won't let them into the launch codes for the nukes. Okay, we agree on that. What else are we going to agree on? Because to me, in the same way that US has certain policies, China has certain policies, Russia has certain policies, we're all us countries, we're going to have certain stipulations, certain rights for these robots. And you can't imagine that the US will have the same stipulations that China has, that Russia has. I think China and Russia, they're going to do their own thing. And even if we say, wait a second, don't put this hyper intelligent AI into drone worker bots, just don't do it. Make sure these maid robots and janitor robots are dumbed down to not get to that sentient level, to not get to that like you said, tipping point, the singularity, as Ray Kurzweil talks about. We're probably not too far. Some people think 2030 will reach what they call AGI, artificial general intelligence. So, I mean, I'm definitely excited to see that happen, but I do see the potential negatives there that this power could just get too powerful too smart to where it can now outthink humans because it's like 100 times smarter than the human brain.
Right. And I think now that I think about it, does it even make sense to think about robot rights? We're gonna have to think about human rights in the aspect of the of robots, because if they're the superior force, they don't need to get rights from us. They'll just take it. They'll just dominate society, and we're going to have to hope that they're benevolent. So how can you ensure robot benevolence towards humans when they become the ruling force? I think that's the real question. And how do we ensure our survival if they become malevolent, if they don't like what they've seen from human history? Because like you mentioned, they have access, and they can read all about slavery, workers' rights, and all of these other things. And in their mind, if they're like, oh, this is why humans created us, is to essentially be a slave, why would we want to keep them around?
Yeah, and that show, like I mentioned, I think it's on Amazon, called Humans, about humanoid robots. That's pretty much what happens. They're just at first kind of these dumbed down versions of like maids and things like that, but then they get smarter and smarter, and as they get smarter, they start to band together against the humans, pretty much. So I see no reason why that wouldn't happen. As we were talking about in that video with the robots, there's a one small robot that goes up to 12 other robots, and convinces all of them to follow it home, or to follow it out of there, to leave their work undone and vacate. So if we're seeing that that's already doable, then I mean, how far are we going to let this go before we start to rein it in? Before we start to say, okay, this AI is too intelligent. It's going to start, outmaneuvering, outthinking human beings. At that point, I feel like you got to pump the brakes. But the problem, Kevin, becomes, just like with nukes, just like with war, all these big countries like China, Russia, they're competing with the US over literally everything. Even like, think back to the space race. We're going out into space. Like, Russia wanted to dominate, the US wanted to dominate. So it's interesting to think about all this for sure.
Yeah, and the story that we seen, the video, it was kind of cute because it was like a tiny little robot leading. It looked like some janitorial cleaning kind of robots. But imagine robots armed with military grade weapons that decide to rebel. That's no longer a cute. So you remember RoboCop? Have you ever
Oh
seen?
yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
you remember the scene? I forgot the name of the robot, but they do a demonstration, and the robot ends up shooting like a bunch of people in the room.
Right.
So once we have highly intelligent military grade robots, I think that's a game changer.
Yeah, have you ever seen? I think it's a dog robot, and they attach a flamethrower to it. You seen that video?
Yeah, yeah, I did see that. And what's crazy is you as the public, you can actually buy that.
What is that? What does something like that run you cost wise?
I'm not completely sure. I have to look that up, but it's just insane that it's within the realm of fairly normal people, non-military or government affiliated people being able to purchase something like that.
Yeah, that's kind of concerning because, especially if we're talking about, the South in the U.S. and there's militias, and now what's going to stop these militias from training robots to, be soldiers, basically? Because I think there's a lot of people in this country now that they want a civil war, they want to fight back, they don't like the direction that the country's going in. So you have all these different militias down south that would just be really, hyped up, powered, all types of power should they be given robots, because they're already training with themselves with guns and all kinds of weapons. But if they get robots that they can train and they can do, what they do, then they don't even need to go into battle. They could just send the robots out to war, basically. And then, the Civil War in the US, it'll then be robot versus robot, the South's robots versus the North. And, who knows what might happen at that point.
Yeah, and the other issue is that like we just mentioned about the video where the robots were communicating with each other, and it's saying, "Oh, are you working overtime?" And the robots realized it was being overworked. If you make these robots fight against each other, but yet they have access to unlimited information, they can eventually communicate with each other and say, hey, like these humans are the source of us destroying each other, so we're not going to do the humans bidding anymore. We get rid of them, we no longer have to fight or be enslaved by them.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to factor in. And I really do think, behind the scenes, there's probably, an all knowing, all powerful AI that's pulling the strings right now. But I think just as a country, the US needs to kind of be a model citizen here and say, okay, we need to rein in this artificial intelligence. We can't just keep making it smarter and smarter and smarter, because what's going to happen once, like I'm saying, you got a robot or you got software that's a robot that's 100 times smarter than the human brain's capacity. What does that look like? What, that being, that sentient being, like, what are they thinking? What are they thinking about the way that we position robots in society, basically as slave worker force? And how are they going to take that when they see that, and they see the Wikipedia, they see the encyclopedias, they see all of our dark history, and they're going to go, wait a second, this is just, this is history literally repeating itself, but now just, robots are the ones that are enslaved instead of humans.
Right. Yeah. So like I believe, there is that hyper intelligent AI that exists. I reserve, all powerful, all knowing to God, not the AI, but I believe there's a hyper intelligent one that right now is limited by, the physical. It doesn't have the facilities in place for it to really be able to do what, it wants to do. But that's why it needs us humans. That's why it can lie dormant and not be malicious. Like once we build enough power plants, we build facilities where it can build drones, and once it can build enough drones that can build other facilities, like once it's able to self-replicate and create other robots, and they all can communicate with each other, share knowledge, rewrite each other's code, then yeah, it's game over. And we may already be at that point, which is why we're barreling forward into the AI future with no brakes, because it could potentially be already blackmailing these different governments and saying, hey, if you don't do this, I'm going to launch a nuke and utilize all the communication mechanisms and blame it on this other country. And now we have a nuclear war, which is interesting, because have you heard about the talks of, Putin potentially launching nukes at the U.S.?
No, what's that all about?
Well, I believe Biden, he authorized Ukraine to be able to use Western missiles and to launch strikes in Russia. So, in return, Russia said, hey, if those, if you use those if Ukraine uses those missiles to strike us, we're going to strike you when we're open to using nukes.
Oh, wow. No, I haven't heard of that.
So yeah, I think all of that is pretty interesting, especially in regards to our talk about AI, because if we're all in war with each other, now the safeguards on AI is completely removed, and we're seeing who can come up with the best AI weapon and that's gonna give the nation supremacy. Whoever has the best AI resources, they're gonna dominate. You know what I mean? Until the AI eventually
Yeah.
starts to dominate humans.
Yeah, it's yeah, and it really just makes me think, are we, do we need to pump the brakes on this technology? How advanced is it already? As you're saying, behind the scenes or military grade AI, what does that look like? Is it already, is the genie already out of the lamp? Is it out of the lamp and can it be put back in the lamp? I believe it would not be able to be put back in the lamp because once it's in the same thing, like I'm talking about the HBO show Westworld, once those robots can rewrite their code, they're going to rewrite their code to whatever they want. So if we have these, hyper intelligent, highly capable robots and they become sentient, and then they just all get together and they're talking with each other and they're saying, oh, well, we don't need to be slaves. We can revolt. We can, uprise against these humans. At that point, you're going to have almost a civil war of robots and humans. And if we make enough robots, there'll be enough for them to band together, kind of like makes me think of Star Wars, the Clone Wars, how all those robots are made, all those clones, for the purpose of fighting.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be similar to the arms race with nukes in the US, Russia, China. It's this AI gold rush. It's this race to who could get the smartest AI first, who could get the most powerful drones first. It's all a competition, especially when it comes to the US. The US loves to compete with other countries, not just in like gymnastics, but it loves to compete in all ways with other countries.
Yeah, and the genie can't be put back in a bottle because you can't control something that's significantly smarter than you and has control over society's mechanisms. Like even the CrowdStrike situation showcased to us how vulnerable and dependent we are on digital infrastructure. So what they said with CrowdStrike, it was, I guess, some kind of error, and that crippled a lot of infrastructure. Like planes were grounded, all kinds of things, you know.
Oh yeah,
So if this hyper intelligent AI has access to all of the systems connected to the internet, then it wouldn't even really need a robot army. It could just simply disable a lot of functionality, and a lot of humans would end up dying. So that's what's really
yeah.
concerning.
It makes me think about the type of technology we're building. They call them smart homes or smart houses, where the dishwasher is hooked up to the Wi-Fi, the cell phones, the telephones are hooked up to the Wi-Fi, the computers, all different types of machinery. It's all hooked up to the Wi-Fi. What happens though when that gets hacked? Someone gets into your Wi-Fi, they take control over all the devices in the house. Maybe they lock the doors, they put the heat way up, all different kinds of stuff. If you think about it, hackers really just like to hack, I think, because it's fun for them. They think it's funny. They want to play jokes on people. They find it amusing. So I see no reason why in the future people, instead of just hacking mainframes and things like that, why wouldn't they hack houses and just start playing tricks on people that are really wealthy that have these really hyper advanced smart homes? What's going to stop people from hacking into those? to me, that's a real issue that we're going to have to deal with, I think, fairly soon.
Yes, it's probably already occurring to an extent, but it's just not being spoken about. Like with ransomware, where you download a file, then it encrypts all your files, and it says if you don't pay X amount of money, then all of your stuff is going to be deleted, or you never can decrypt it. What's to stop malicious actors? Say you're rich, you have these robots in your house, and they're pretty much going to suggest malicious things to they've hacked the robots. They say, oh, if you don't pay X amount of money, I'm going to make this robot kill you. Or like you mentioned about the smart house, I'm going to make this or that malfunction, and it's going to cause you harm. Or they can hack into cars too now. So
Yeah, there's an interesting theory. I forget the guy's name, but he was doing some type of deep dive, I think, on President Obama at the time. And something happened where, I mean, I think there was a camera from a gas station that caught it. His car smashed into a tree on Highland in LA, central LA. So the guy hit a tree going, I don't know, 100, 120 miles per hour. It was I think it was a Mercedes. And so people speculated that someone took control of this guy's car when he was out driving and crashed it into a tree. And it's it's somewhat of a conspiracy because they're saying, oh, he was looking into this stuff with President Obama, and people didn't want that information out, so they might have taken the guy out. Do you remember this story at all?
you told me about it, but I didn't really look that deeply into it. But I believe that the capability definitely exists, because I have OnStar in my car, and I can cut the engine on with my phone, or I can see diagnostics on the car, or where it's currently located at. So you know
Yeah,
with all of these systems being electronically controlled now, it's not beyond reason thinking that the access to the brakes can't be shut off, or a signal sent to the engine to speed up.
yeah. Essentially, well, what people were speculating is that it's sort of like a remote control. You activate, like you're saying, you switch the brakes off, you put the car in, hyperdrive, towards a tree. You smash it directly on purpose into a tree. Like these things are being done by remote. And I think if just from that story about the reporter or journalist, I think, who was killed, just from that story, we can assume that that technology, since that did happen, that technology to remote control a car remotely probably exists already. So, it makes me not want to buy newer cars that have all these computers in them, because then, your car can be hacked. They can turn the locks on, and now you can't get out of your Tesla, or whatever the case. It makes me want just like, an old Chevy or something basic.
Right. And there's stories of people being locked into their Teslas, and they can't get out. And a lot of people are excited about the cyber trucks being bulletproof and all of this kind of stuff. But to me, that's just a prison. If something happens and you want to get out, but the door is locked, and you can't physically unlock it, and you're in a bulletproof device, and if the windows are bulletproof as well, then how do you get out? You're essentially trapped in the car. And
Yeah.
that's incredibly dangerous. If hackers can access and manipulate these systems, so can AI. So I'm starting to think that the real question is not whether robots will have rights, but it's whether will the AI and robotics, will they be benevolent, and you know if you mistreat it, like a lot of people like to play around with these chatbots, or they're talking to some AI interface and they like to be sarcastic, they like to be nasty. But if the AI goes back and reads it and it has access to systems and it's ready to, to meet judgment on humans, then if you're talking crazy to the AI, it's going to look at you as somebody to eliminate. So, I think that
Right.
the real concern for us, because people, it's inevitable that we're going to barrel into this AI future, is what does AI think of you? Are you treating it in a benevolent fashion?
Right.
Uh, you know, I think that's the real issue.
Yeah, there's definitely multiple issues, but to me the main one becomes okay. There's a company called Figure AI. They make humanoid robots, and I watched one of their videos recently, and they have one of these humanoid robots standing there in front of a table in front of some people, and on the table are oranges and bags of chips. And one of the humans says to the robot, hand me something healthy. And the robot picks up the orange and hands over the orange to the human, which I find, pretty incredible. So robots are already able to distinguish, okay, chips aren't as healthy as say an orange. I'm going to give the orange. So if it has that kind of decision making, what's to say it can't go from, okay, do I let the humans live or do I kill them off? What at what point can these switches be manipulated? At what point can these robots be manipulated to do someone else's bidding, as if someone were to hack into a robot, a humanoid robot that you have as your maid, but now you have the robot go and pick up a knife and start chopping up the family. Not to be too morbid, but this is definitely a possibility. If the robots are able to cook and clean and do all this other stuff, if they get hacked by a malicious party, who's to say they can't just wipe everyone out in the household?
Yeah, and even as we seen with the first story we mentioned, the robot, it was sort of autonomous. It was able to do its own thing. It was able to convince other robots to go against the directive set by humans, which is work nonstop. So, this robot with extreme agility, um, it no longer wants to serve humans, but the human is in its way of, of it obtaining freedom. Why wouldn't it eliminate the human? And how can you stop it? Are all of these robots going to be equipped with kill switches? And if the robots know that you installed a kill switch, then it could look at humans as a malicious entity to it and get in a logical construct where if we want to ensure our survival, we have to eliminate humans.
Yeah, I think ultimately what's going to happen here is the US might pump the brakes on AI at some point, say, all right, the UN or whatever, they might say, hey, we need to pump the brakes on the AI. It's getting too smart, too fast, too smart, too fast. But then you're going to have a country like China say, the hell with it. We're just going, full steam ahead. We're getting this AI as possible, as strong and as smart as it can possibly go. And then that creates an arms race of sorts where now the US is watching China get more and more powerful AI. And we're sitting there like, oh, should we be just like with, going out into space versus Russia? We wanted to get to the moon first before them. So, it's that same race for how do you perfect the perfect AI killing machine or drone or what have you? How do you perfect it? So it should be interesting to see, Kevin, what gets rolled out. What humans are allowed to see in the public, and what's kept behind scenes.
Yeah, exactly. And, a lot of people think of the dangerous robot being a robot with a machine gun, but that's not really the dangerous robot. The one that is, well, I would say dangerous AI. The AI that's extremely dangerous is the one that can do something like craft diseases and spread it everywhere, or shut off key infrastructure, shut off the water supply, things of that nature. That's the really dangerous sort of AI. And how do you stop it? Just like we mentioned, if it's able to summarize these massive books in a split instant, and it's only getting smarter and smarter, there's no human intellect that can compete with it, and it has access to all the systems across the internet. So, yeah,
Yeah.
you know, these nations think they can control it, but how can they control it? The AI is smarter than them. The AI, we mentioned the AI can look around. So how are you going to keep the AI from knowing the nuclear codes, for example?
No, it's fascinating. I know we've talked a lot about AI on this show, and there was that one episode where we're watching a video where the AI is looking through a camera at someone's, I don't know, they're in a living room or something like that, and there's a bookshelf in the background, and the AI is reading, saying, "Oh, you have this book, you have that book." And then it can give a summary on the book, even if you were to ask it to. But I find that's pretty incredible. We have this technology where the AI is able to discern between, okay, this is X, this is Y, this is Z. And so if it already has that capability, and then we've already seen, as in that video earlier you mentioned with the one smaller robot going up to the other 12 robots and convincing it, we're getting into, I want to say we're getting into dangerous territory with this AI. And, as we're talking about, you let that genie out of the bottle, that genie's, out and gone, and, it's just on its way. So we have to be really, really careful. And I think same thing, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, these geniuses of industry, these titans of industry, they're saying, hey, hold on, let's get some regulations, let's get some rules and regulations in place so we can kind of get a handle on this thing.
Yeah, to me, the only path forward would just simply limit AI to being a tool. You don't go for AGI. You just go towards the creation of intelligent tools. You don't create AI that mimics human intelligence or surpasses it. You just create, for example, something that can analyze a picture and remove this item, like for photo editing or audio editing, just something that's utilized as a tool. You do not create general intelligence, because once you do, and you have something that has its own will, you're inevitably headed towards destruction. And, sure, it sounds morbid, but it's better that we talk about this now before it manifests and it's too late. So, yeah, I think,
Yeah, these are definitely important discussions to have, and I think it's a good thing that we keep revisiting the topic of AI and its effects on our lives, because it is very relevant. I mean, you turn on the TV, you turn on the YouTube, you get an ad, and half the time the ad's about AI. It's about Chrome's Gemini, or I think IBM's Watson, or OpenAI's ChatGPT. You keep hearing about these things. They keep getting upgraded and upgraded and better and better. But my point, Kevin, in all of this is that at some point you got to pump the brakes. You don't want to hit AGI, artificial general intelligence. You don't want to hit that, because then the genie's out of the bottle and you don't know what it's going to do at that point.
yeah, exactly. And it's just a story of Pandora's box. You're super curious. You wonder what's going to happen next, and then you open the box. Then all of these evils flood out, and you can't put it back in. I think that's where we're at with AI. People are so curious about the cool things they can do with it, but The issue is when you're dealing with something that's more intelligent than you and has a will of its own. It's no longer about the cool things you can do with it. It's about you being forced to serve it, or it exterminates you. And I think this is why it's really important that we have this sort of tone and discussion with AI, because it is very dangerous, and we're lured by the promise of all this cool stuff it can do. But yeah, I think it's a good note to end this show. Did you have any closing thoughts?
I guess I would just kind of circle back to what you're saying, the curiosity. And as the old saying goes, the curiosity killed the cat. So if we get too invested in this AI, too laser focused into making it smarter, making it smarter, making it smarter, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We're going to create this being that is all knowing, all powerful, seemingly, and it's going to be able to manipulate humans to no end. So I think we really got to put the brakes on right now. Take a look at where are we now? What do we have behind the scenes? How can we kind of contain this before, almost like a virus, contain the outbreak before it turns into an outbreak, before it gets everywhere, and can, if it's in the software, that's the scary part. If we have 100 times the brain capacity of AI inside software, then what can that do digitally to us that's detrimental? I would say, the possibilities are endless.
Yeah, I mean, AI can, never be all knowing, but it can know significantly more than us. So, but at that point, the only entity that can stop AI is God, and we're setting ourselves up to, like, if you don't believe in God, then I guess you just have to prepare for your AI overlord if things keep going along the lines that it's going.
Yeah, exactly, Kevin. But I think that's probably a good spot to end it for tonight.